All right, and it's a story that we're going to continue to follow here on Breakfast Television for years to come. And many agree that our education system across Canada falls very short in teaching students about Indigenous history. What you're going to notice every Wednesday, we're going to have a bigger discussion about Indigenous history. Joining me for this panel, Sid Cicero, and we have a number of guests, and we want to be able to talk about a lot of things, Sid.
For sure. We've invited Pam Palmater, Ryerson professor. We're having some technical issues with Pam. Hopefully she'll jump on momentarily. Also, we say good morning to Jodie Williams, co-chair First Nations Metis and Inuit Education Association of Ontario. Jodie, good morning to you. And Banaisekwe Henry, grade 9 student from St. Clair Catholic District School Board, joining us today. Again, we're working on Pam, and hopefully we'll speak to her as well. Jodie, I want to start with you and a note that I saw yesterday, and obviously the story out of Kamloops, 215 dead children at a residential school, made national headlines. A poll conducted by the Canadian Race Relation Foundation and the Assembly of First Nations about a week after the story went public asked Canadians, how much did you know about residential schools prior to this story? 2/3 of Canadians said they knew little or nothing about the history of this country's residential school system. Do those numbers at all surprise you?
No, that's the reality. And that's part of the work that we have been engaged in for many, many years, is trying to raise awareness and educate and support teachers who are now having to teach this content in their classrooms. And what's really important about this is the advocacy that we have to do to ensure that teachers are properly trained. It's one thing to have curriculum that's slowly being revised to now include this content into schools. But it's another thing to make sure that teachers are adequately trained and prepared and understand themselves in order to have these conversations in classrooms that are also age appropriate.
Let's talk about what those conversations in classrooms really do look like. And I want to get your take, Banaisekwe. You're a grade 9 student, so you've gone through the elementary school system, and now you're seeing what's being taught at the secondary level. What is being taught?
Not much. When I was in grade 6, I went to school in Forest, Ontario, so that's just outside of my reservation. And I remember in grade 6, they taught a little bit about residential schools during Orange Shirt Day, like during that week. And my teacher asked me and the whole class, what good can we find in residential schools? What was the good outcome of residential schools? Not talking about what happened, what they took from us, how it impacted the future, how it impacts me, how it impacted my parents. All she wanted to talk about is what was good about residential schools.
Jodie, you said something interesting about teaching in a way that's age appropriate. How do you do that with this story? How do you put this in the curriculum and still protect some of our younger students from the truth of it?
Absolutely. The conversation, of course, in a primary grade is going to look very different than a secondary grade. And it's scaffolding in how we bring the conversation forward into schools. So with the younger children, it's more a focus around relationships. And, you can have conversations around broken promises that start to move into a deeper understanding in terms of the relationship here with Canada and Indigenous peoples who come from and still are existing from nations separate from Canada. And these are, when we talk about residential schools, we have to also talk about the bigger picture, which often gets missed when we're solely focusing on one aspect. And so it's the bigger story that we're trying to get out that many Canadians are just coming to learn about now. And so that in itself, points to the bigger problem here in terms of how education continues to this day to erase people out of existence. And so that's what we're trying to do. We want to put back everything that was taken out, plus.
I want to go back to you, Banaisekwe. You said something in your first answer there about, yes, there are some learnings, but just in the language, just what good came out of the residential schools. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Wow. Okay, so at that point, I'm wondering, does anyone put up their hand and say, challenge that? I mean, are kids at a point where they say, or they feel like they can actually ask those questions, or is it, here's what's being taught, we need to just accept that?
I was at the point where I said, excuse me, teacher, there was nothing good that came out of residential schools. Maybe for the colonized world, but not for Indigenous people. The residential school system only took our culture and only took our strength.
Question for both of you. Jodie, I'll start with you. You have a forum here to speak to anyone you want. You can say anything to any politician, any person of authority, in order to change the way this is being taught, as in to make it taught in the first place properly. What message would you like to send, and to whom?
Number one, put our languages back to the forefront. That's the what was taken out. And we want to have languages put back, which means investing in. Right now, out of the curriculum revisions, out of all of them that have taken place, the language curriculum is at the bottom of the list. It hasn't been touched in 20 years. That points to the lack of priority in this area. And we also want to have Indigenous peoples leading the way, not other people making decisions. It has to be those with the lived experience, and guided by people like residential survivors. They have to be the ones leading this work. The other thing for teachers and for everyone is that this is relevant to every single person. This information, this education, this is an investment into our future, because if we want to talk about having a just society, we really have to critically understand what continues to cause these injustices. And the work that we're doing in education is for students like Banaisekwe. It's supporting the youth, because they're the ones who's going to be coming up real soon. They're the ones who are going to be making the decisions in the future. So, how do we support and empower those students to feel really good about who they are and confident, so that, they're prepared for the world that they're entering into?
We have run out of time, but Banaisekwe, would you like to say some final words? I think, Jodie, you said it so well there. But Banaisekwe, to you, as a student, as you're learning, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that Bojo, Banaisekwe, Indigenous cause, Mong and Dodem, Kikunangai, Wakejnang and Donjaba, Ojibwe, Bodowadami, Medeyashkinikwe and Dao. I think that that's what needs to be put back. My identity is the thing that needs to be put back. Every Canadian, every government, and every church needs to hear this.
Well said. Banaisekwe, Jodie, we appreciate it. Our apologies to Pam Palmater. We'll definitely talk to her another day. But thank you both for coming on, and have a good day. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, so very powerful. If you're just joining us now and you want to get a full link to that panel, by the way, we're going to post that on our website, and you'll be able to catch that as well. And every Wednesday, we have these extended discussions, and it goes beyond the discussions, right? It's the action as well. And so that's what we are going to be doing here on Breakfast Television. So please hold us accountable to that.
Absolutely.
7:38 is your time right now. We're going to check in with Frankie. Good morning.